the Janus Halcyon 250, a 100-year-old... Oh, wait a second.
Here's the bike I crashed on 6 months later. Although many of you warned me not to ride this bike, I just finished riding it 2,331 miles. If you're new here, this isn't a Harley. This is more American than one. I know what else you may be thinking. This bike looks 100 years old, but it was actually just built this year. More on that in a bit. Most people think Harley means American, but like many big manufacturers, some parts and even full models have been built overseas. But this bike is built almost entirely in a small Midwestern town here in the US. Earlier this year, a friend told me about these bikes when I became obsessed with the idea of riding America's almost 100-year-old highway on a bike reminiscent of that highway, Route 66. Good luck finding anyone willing to lend you their 100-year-old bike for a 2,500-mile road trip. Okay, I might have been too scared to ride a bike that old that far. So a brand new bike that was reminiscent of bikes 100 years ago seemed like the next best thing. I figured if countless other Janus owners can take their bikes on long distance trip, including the original designer who rode across the US with it and did 2 1,000-mile saddle sores, then surely I could ride far with it too. And with the nature of the crash, despite having an accredited crash investigator's analysis in my wreck video, the comments blaming the bike were everywhere.
When a famous YouTuber crashed one, then another YouTuber said it wasn't her fault, then she said it was, then another famous YouTuber said it was definitely the bike. Then we held a public crucifixion for the crash victim, covering up that the newfangled machine was really a dastardly danger to society.
No matter how much I responded to the responses and cited research papers and investigator analyses, the torches just kept on coming. So I figured I just need to ride it. Far. So we can all see, is this bike really dangerous? After riding it almost every day, all day, for 2 weeks, here's what I found. Besides discovering that I clearly knew very little about old-style bikes, hardtails, what that means, how to ride them exactly. When you ride a bike like this, no heated grips, no ABS, no traction control, no heated seat, no cruise control, and no rear suspension, you really see what kind of rider are you.
I'm tired of this, Grandpa.
But first, since these bikes are reminiscent to what bikes were 100 years ago, to truly understand what we're looking at, we need to go back to what bikes used to be. The first gasoline-powered bike was built in 1885 by Gottlieb Daimler and Wilhelm Maybach. It was basically a wooden bicycle with an engine. While Daimler's invention is recognized as the first true motorcycle because it ran on gas, there were steam-powered bicycles, in the 1860s, built by Sylvester Roper. The first motorcycle available for public sale was the Hildebrand and Wolfmuller, which was released in 1894. Back then, just about every motorcycle was a hardtail, meaning no rear suspension. Indian tried adding rear suspension in 1913, but it had its issues, so it never really became popular. Race bikes in the 1930s had a rear suspension that increased lap times, and finally by the 1950s, rear suspension became more common. Rear suspension isn't just for comfort, it helps stabilize the bike. Without it, you are the suspension. You could say the same thing about riding a bike without ABS. You are the ABS, learning to modulate the brake pressure yourself. Or a bike with no traction control. You're the one balancing throttle and grip. We didn't see ABS and traction control until the late 80s, and they became more common in the 2000s. But they're still kind of considered a higher price point addition. Since 2016, Europe requires all motorcycles to have ABS if they're over 125cc. Modern bikes automate all those instincts. The Halcyon 250 puts you in charge of it. You need to be a much more knowledgeable, active rider when riding a bike like this. Because of that, despite it being low cc, I would not say this is a beginner bike. There are 3 other models, and this is the only one with no rear suspension. We'll get to that in a little bit. When these bikes are made, it's like a step back in time. Other than the engine that's made in a factory, these bikes are 80% assembled and handmade in Goshen, Indiana. The hand painting, fender bending, assembly are all made in shop, and the leather is made by Amish just a few blocks down the street. You can watch the video building the specific bike that I crashed and rode across Route 66 a couple videos ago. As for the engine, Janus found a US import location that makes the Honda CG125, and they had it bored to a 229 for their Halcyon and Griffin 250s. Each of these bikes are all made to order, so you can pick the colors, the mirrors, the seat, the handlebars, the logos, the luggage. just about everything. People who work on vintage Hondas say that it's very similar to work on Janus bikes as well. But supposedly these engines are so simple that Janus encourages people to work on the bikes themselves. And they have over 40 maintenance videos on their YouTube channel. Okay, so what was it like riding this bike? Long distance, on the highways, around town. Is it dangerous? Is it terrifying? But first, for reference on fit, here's what I look like sitting on it. I'm 5'3.75 inches tall. Yes, that quarter inch makes a big difference. I've got a 29-inch Taylor inseam, 31-inch inseam if I measure it down to the floor. There was some confusion on that. And here's Neil sitting on it.
How tall are you?
About 6 foot.
When guys say about 6 foot, that means about 5'10", I think. So here's where my feet sit on the Halcyon 250, and here's where they are on the Halcyon 450. Both pretty flat foot. And the Griffins are their off-roading models, so a little taller with some knobby tires. Here's where my feet sit on the Griffin 250, and here's where they sit on the Griffin 450. But these bikes are so light, so the 1 foot down trick is literally all you need if you're tiptoeing a bike like this. I have a video of short rider tips I show on a Honda CB650, which I'll link to down below, that you can apply to a lot of bikes, including this one. Now, as for taking this long distance across the US, stupidest thing I've ever done.
This bike wasn't made to ride long distances. Besides the Halcyon 250 being one of 4 Janus models with no rear suspension, the 450 models are also reported to have a top speed of 90 miles per hour, where the 250's top speed is reported at 70. But I hear you shouldn't and say, hold my tea.
You can watch the whole road trip in the last video. So with the no rear suspension and the fact that I was riding Route 66, a lot of portion of that road is very rough. Not just bumpy in some sections, but actual gravel. So my back was killing me pretty much every day, all day for 2 weeks straight. I was also leaning forward a lot, which was a tip I got from instructors, which I'll get more into in a second. I had the comfiest seat on the bike, which actually wasn't bad. My butt did not hurt so bad. But I did discover that Aleve works way better for back pain than Tylenol or Advil. Thank you, Jerry, for that tip. So Tim Frazier, he's the lead mechanic at Janus. You may recognize that name from the 90s. He was a professional hill climber back then. And he gave me a tip that just made everything click, which is to treat the bike, especially on rough roads, like trail riding. So I might lift my butt up the seat a little bit on some bumps, grip the tank with my legs. The back of the tank has kind of a sharp edge, which I thought for sure gripping it for long would bruise them. But once you're riding, you kind of don't really notice it. Kind of the same thing with my knee, for the 2 people asking. It's still kind of swollen and bruised, even 6 months after the accident. It's more uncomfortable right now that I'm just talking to you in my office. But when I was riding, I kind of forgot about it and didn't really notice it. So on Route 66, I was mostly at lower speeds on the bike. That's when I had the most fun with it. Anywhere from like 25 to 50. But there were tons of stretches that were over 50 miles per hour. And my hands and feet holding that 1-cylinder vibrating bike definitely felt it towards the end of the day. So the top speed on this bike, I've only ever gotten it to 61. And I just kind of assumed that Route 66 was one continuous road. Probably max speed 45 miles per hour? No. A lot of it goes on the interstate. Or even if you put avoid highways, the only road you can cross the country in is 75 miles per hour, and people are going 85. So being passed by semis going 85, 90 miles per hour when I'm going 58 was terrifying. Now, the original designer and Neil have both gotten this to 71. Full tuck downhill, I'm pretty sure. But their 450 models can go up to 90 miles per hour. And they also have rear suspension. So those would probably be better on the highways. But for me, a full day of riding on Route 66, I was averaging about 200 miles. And that was in the saddle like all day, from like 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. with some stops. So hitting bumps at high speeds, this is where you need to be very active and paying attention to what you're doing. So when I crashed and I hit that raised surface that went to vertical grooves, which is a known cause of instability for motorcyclists and bicycles, I didn't notice the road was changing until I was on it. I didn't know any of these tricks that I've learned since then. And the first day on this road trip, I took this bike at highway speeds, 55 miles per hour, hit a bump, and the bike swayed. It scared the crap out of me because that was a very similar scenario to my crash. But this time I had the tips, which was to grip the tank, lean forward, roll off the throttle, and that swaying just dissipated and it straightened up. So I asked the lead mechanic, is that supposed to happen? And he was saying that yes, with a bike with no rear suspension, that can happen. Every sway doesn't mean you're going to end up in a death wobble. It's just the energy dissipating through the bike because there's no rear suspension. So after that, for the rest of the road trip, I just made sure anytime I saw a bump or anytime I was high speeds, just in case I didn't notice it, I kept my knees gripped on the tank and leaning forward, and I never had that issue again. And I hit a lot of bumps, let me tell ya. Now, as far as the fuel range, I did test this. I wanted to run it dry. So it can take about 2 gallons, and I need to switch it to reserve at about 75 miles in. And once I did that, the bike kept going for 122 miles until I ran out of gas. And the red bottle you see on the side of the bike, you can get that along with the bike. And the amount of gas that fits in there can take you for about 10 miles. And when I did that fuel test, I was going about maybe 45 to 50 miles per hour most of the time, but a little bit of in town at the start. So just to be on the safe side, I would fill up every time I hit a gas station about 70 or so miles. So around town, that's where I enjoyed the bike the most, especially if the roads were smooth. Bumpy roads on this bike was very annoying. With the length, it just made it kind of uncomfortable for me at my height to stand up as I would on a dirt bike. But maybe if I could have done that more instead of just kind of being in a constant squat, because a lot of bumps, you actually don't even see them. You can't tell they're there until you are over them on the road, apparently, I've noticed, now that I'm on a bike that requires you to be much more active. Something I've noticed around town is that people love this bike.
Tell you what, it's beautiful. I like.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's neat as heck.
I've ridden over 30 bikes, and this is probably the only bike that not only do riders also love this bike, but non-riders notice it and comment on it because it's just so cool looking. There's really nothing quite like it being made today that you can just buy unless you get something custom. Okay, so is it dangerous? Is it terrifying? So I wasn't completely irresponsible. You know, I found a crash investigator from a police department to analyze the crash. I talked to instructors, figured out what I could be doing differently. Janus rebuilt it, changed some things on it to make it more friendly for the riding I would be doing, changed the tires, changed anything that wasn't either tested or could have been a contributing factor to the crash. And then they had another crash investigator test ride the bike in person and clear it, declare that it does not have an inherent wobble. I looked up wobbles, weaves, how they're caused, how to prevent them. So I really didn't think that I was scared until that first day on the road trip when I hit that bump.
You're okay. We are fine.
And pretty much anything that was a contributing factor to my crash before. So when I hit the first bump and it swayed, that freaked me out. But once I had the tips and then I continued to work through those tips and experience bumps and things with no issues, I got more confident in the bike and myself. And once I hit vertical grooves, another contributing factor to my crash, that really freaked me out at first. So I remember what professional racer and instructor Dylan Code suggested, which is to not ride those things parallel. So anytime I remembered and noticed, I would ride them kind of at a weave. But there were a couple times when I didn't notice or I just wasn't thinking, I guess, and I was riding those vertical grooves straight and I had no issues. This bike may have no rear suspension, ABS, or traction control, but damn it, I gonna learn how to be those things. Eventually, as I kept riding over the rough roads, bumps, getting swayed by crosswinds, and semis racing by with nothing happening, somewhere around mile 1 and 2,000, I wasn't afraid anymore. I learned how to handle a simple bike. The older generations often look at new generations with their new technology and say they're getting softer, whinier, weaker, when the new generation calls this new technology innovation, convenience, safer. We call bikes without suspension dangerous. Will there be a time when we call bikes without ABS or traction control dangerous? But maybe what's really dangerous is not remembering to learn how to ride these bikes without it doing all these things for us. This bike was never built to make riding easier. It was built to make it raw. Somewhere along the way, we traded connection for convenience, and maybe that's what we've really lost.